Morning. Here I am once more on a Wednesday morning for Norma Talks. This week I really thought about what was I going to talk about today. And one thing that sometimes comes up out of the, you might say, the soup of life is through my clients. And I had 90% made up my mind I was going to talk about the soul based on last week and some of the things that I had said and gone on. And sure enough, I actually had a client where I was talking to the soul and asked, well, what was its purpose here? And it didn't know. And that got me really thinking, because it was the first time I've ever run into that. They usually tell me where they come from and what's going on and things like that. And it made me think, I haven't done one of these readings for a long time, but I'm going to tell you the story because I find sometimes I am led into pathways by very, very interesting ways. It was over a Christmas, New Year holiday, and I happened to have a book that was given to me written by a Korean man who was a healer. And he talked about how he could go back to when the souls were originally created and look at the journey. So I'm reading this book and I thought, I wonder if I can do that. If he can do that, why can't I do that? So I got in contact with some of my regular clientele and said, look, I want to, attempt to do this reading. Is it okay? Can I experiment with you? And they kindly said yes. And lo and behold, I began to find, and again, it's by asking the question and knowing the direction that you're going in, what you're wanting, I was able to start to follow the soul back through all its different experiences. Now, the first time I didn't actually get to the very, very beginning, but I think it was the second or third time, I went right back to where I saw the souls being released from this, what I would call massive of energy. And these souls all come out looking the same. But they're not the same. That's one of the things I found out, because they're each of us individuals. And so I would follow the souls back through all their different experiences, come to this place where the soul is being released, and then I would follow it back on up, bringing back what I discovered there. Now, this is where I got totally surprised. In this planet, this is all about learning how to receive love, how to allow the love in, to love yourself so that you can accept the universal love. And that's designed principally for when it's time for you to leave the body, you allow that universal love that comes to you to bring it in, to allow it into who you are, because you are familiar with it and you know that it's there and you know you deserve to have it, and you don't have any guilt or regret. That I learned all about doing past life regression work, but it's basically to be able to do that. I did not find love. And I tell you, that surprised me. But what I did find was even greater. When the soul first comes out, there's this most magnificent feeling of being, just being. Now we could put another word to it, maybe aliveness or something like that, but it wasn't just that. It was this beingness. And it's really something, because when I look back often in a lot of the especially transformation work I've done, I've made notes about being, to be, must be, beingness. And here I was beginning, the first time this happened was to feel this, and it just literally blew me away. And it was, wow, this is something. And since then, whenever I have done one of these readings, call them soul journey readings, is I always end up at that spot with the soul coming out and feeling that beingness. Now, there's been many stories along the way, and I'm just going to give you the soul journey. What is the soul journey that we're on? First of all, let's acknowledge that the soul is an infinite. In other words, once it has been created, and I think until it maybe goes back into the, you might say, the home base, as it's done all its big journey around our magnificent, huge universe, is it's basically here to experiment, to learn different things. So people have different kinds of journeys. Now, for those of us that are here, we've all ended up one way or another on Earth. And I have talked about before how we come to Earth many, many different ways. Not just like how I was taught originally is, you know, you chose to be here, you chose your parents, all that kind of thing about choosing, when I discovered that wasn't absolutely true at all. And also, one of the other things was that as people went, I began to visit many different planets. I began to visit many different dimensions. Now, what's the difference between a planet and a dimension? A planet is like Earth. There is a form, like you're in some form of rock, we'll say, and you have a body of some kind. Now, because I'm looking at a human from a humanoid perspective, I mostly, but not always, saw people in a sort of humanoid way. That may not necessarily be true, because sometimes I did not see people or the soul as a human-looking humanoid. So there's been, but I was sorry, I got myself sidetracked a little bit. The difference between a dimension is it's a dimension. And the first time I ran into a dimension was, I was actually very early experimenting with this, and a very good friend of mine, it was like I was going back and she was in this healing space, absolutely beautiful green, very, very green, very beautiful, almost an emerald, but not quite an emerald green, but very much like that. And it was a healing spot, and she had been placed in this healing spot. And then when I went back further, she was in a very toxic environment, and it was like acid to her soul. Like she just didn't understand it, and it was like acid. And it was what I later termed a being, which I termed the Watchers, because they all look the same to me. But they kind of watch the progression of the soul. They're there when we come out, and they seem to show up at different times when they're needed. And they placed her in this healing energy. Now that was the first dimension. It wasn't a planet. It was just her soul was put in this place to heal, and then she came into Earth. Now, when we went back on this particular friend's life, was that again, because it was very early in the time, was when I began to realize she was we were in a spaceship and moving around, and to this day she's a great traveler. She loves to travel, she loves exploring new things, and that's part and parcel of what she does within her life. And that's another thing that I found was consistent, that the majority of us have had a lifetime on a spaceship, different kinds of spaceships. And very often we do end up here because a spaceship crashes, or they get here and they're exploring on the auric level, basically, and then they go back to the spaceship and the spaceship won't work. All that kind of ties in at times how people end up on Earth. But also too, so most of us have had some form. And what was really funny, this one person I was working, to me it was funny, sorry, went back to, I said, oh, I can see all the spaceships around, but you're working in the ground crew. And she said, yes, I have no desire to be in space. And I had to laugh, because she wasn't. She went in what I would normally see, this is the person's spaceship kind of lifetimes, maybe several lifetimes there or not. But no, she was grounded, and she was not going to go into space. And so the soul, begins to already formulate in some ways who and what we are, or how we express ourselves. So the key was learning, growing, understanding, being in certain places that weren't very nice to something like us here. If we were looking at our planet, especially right now from somewhere, we'd go, ooh, who would want to be there? There are other planets that aren't so nice, but there are other planets that are lovely to be on, and just very much into the arts or learning or just being, as I talk about being. Most planets that I have visited, they are not emotional like we are here on Earth. They are more mental. People can talk often just through thinking very easily. but there's more of an sort of, you might say, a pursuit on the intellectual / mental element of things. So in other words, thinking and awareness and a growth factor from that. And how long we stay at a particular place doesn't seem to follow any particular formula either. Sometimes people stay quite a long time at a place, and then maybe it's boredom. You know, if we're here to explore, and let's face it, sometimes we can, I don't know about you, I can get bored if nothing's really happening. And in fact, I was doing a reading for someone the other day, and she was asking me a difference about two different jobs and the job she was at. And I said, are you beginning to get bored with your job? And she said, well, I guess actually, yes, I am. So that's why considering another jumper into another thing. So sometimes we just get bored because it's so nice and we're there forever. And so we feel that urge to go and explore a little more, go and explore another place. And trustingly, it will be a nice place to be in. But I do want to talk about a couple of the other dimensions. Now, I used to do a lot of channeling for people's guides, and I would go to homes and they would have a group in my younger years up to 12 people. And where I didn't channel a guide, my guide, I really didn't channel too much except sometimes to just set up the evening. But the person's guide would come through and talk to them. And one of the early times I did that, there was talk about a person having fairy blood. No, I didn't know anything about fairy blood. But it was very clear that this person had fairy blood. And usually when they had fairy blood, they are very artistic. And so consequently, there's some funny stories I had, which I don't need to share here, but that people who would go, what? What do you mean you got fairy blood? But it became very obvious that at some point of time, human and fairies had interrelated because some people carry what's called fairy blood. And the interesting thing is they usually saw fairies when they were young, and number one, or they're very light and airy. They're very, very light and airy beings. But then I got to see the fairy dimension. I got to see that same dimension, that same feeling that I felt when the channeling from the guy was channeling to the person and talking about coming from fairy blood and maybe giving direction. I don't remember what all that was about because I don't hold on to that. But it's because I'm just the channel. But the dimension of the fairies was wonderful. That was great. The other one was where it was a dimension of art. Now, it seemed like the whole sky was the platform for being able to draw. And I'm going to put my hand across the screen because that was like doing in big colors like this over the sky, different colors. And it would they were making scenarios with these colors and things. And then they could kind of wipe it all away somehow. I don't know how they did that. But this was me looking at through the soul journey when I went there with this person that was in this very, very creative. And guess what? Yeah, they have a lot of artistic talent in this life too. I think that we can and do have and bring where the instinct and the inner being of our soul wants to go, how we want to be, that beingness again. How do we want to be? How do we want to express? How do we want to go? And so there's many. I've seen very mental planets. I've seen water planets. I've seen a very mechanical planets. They are all just an experience. And then we end up here. Now the soul comes here and I've talked about this before too, for various reasons. Sometimes they are coming here to hide, which is what I just had the other day, which is what the soul didn't know why they were here. Coming to hide from something, which means that's a large part of their makeup is not to be seen. Sometimes we come here for plain curiosity. Sometimes we come here because we're sent here. You going there. Sometimes we come here because our spaceship crashed or whatever. There's lots of reasons why we're here, but very often the reason why the soul comes in, which is why in my transformation work I usually look at what brought the soul into earth, because though that where we came from lays a basis for how we have lived our lifetimes here. And so consequently, it becomes very important to come back to this understanding of that we are so much more than we ever thought we would be. We're so much more. So instead of hiding or feeling guilty or feeling regret, now I kind of moving into the point of when we pass on, when we leave this body, it's really important not to have any guilt or regret. And to work at forgiving yourself, forgiving other people, whatever you need to do, so that you get very clear. And why? To allow the universal love in. You know, you'll hear about light and love, right? If you're anything to do in the spiritual journey, and especially coming from the era I came from in that growth patterning, light and love is what people say. Well, what does that mean? Light really means love, because in the light is the love. And I was taught this as young, I taught my kids this. If you ever think that you're dead, because you don't always know, look for a light. Because on every vibration, every level, there are people who have lights to show you the way so that you don't have to get stuck. And in that light is taking you to that place where there is love, where there is this embracing love. But if you're filled with guilt over things that you've done and never forgiven yourself for, then you don't let that love in. You see, it's unfortunate for a long time. People have been taught that they are judged. But it's really us that does the judging. The love energy doesn't judge. It just accepts you for you and is willing to give you all this love that you want and possibly can, I was going to say handle, that you can let in. And that's like handling it. Because if you've got any part of you that won't let that in, then the transition is difficult. I'll agree with that. I've had to help some people. Anyway, that's another story of getting over, because they carry stuff inside that they've never let go of. So you need to be clear. You need to let that light, which carries the love, into their own system. And this is why when I do my transformation work, we end up with a little exercise using color to bring in the love into the system. So that more and more they get used to accepting love, being at one with love, knowing they're worthy of that love because it's there for them. And that's our way out of this. If a lot of people say, I want to get out of, I don't want to be here. I don't like this place. I want to go. Well, first of all, you got to be able to come at terms with all of your feelings, number one, or emotions. And the second thing is you need to be able to receive the love that's on this planet. This is a love planet. This is a planet that supports you, that loves it, that you're here. And it's unfortunate we often disrespect it. And people want to control it or do whatever. But the reality is it's just there loving you, allowing you to move in the direction that you want to go in. So I want you to be aware that you do have within you a soul, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it spirit, but to me it's a soul, because I've watched them being born. I've watched them coming out of this massive energy, and the aliveness, the beingness, because that's the only word that I can really put on it. That beingness is there, and you carry that. And yes, we have experiences that aren't always nice, but we need to know that that part is within us, that wants to express, that wants to be with us. Now, we just happen to be on a planet which is emotional, so that we need to also understand how we handle all those feelings. So I want you this week to think about, what do you think you hold on to that stops love, the universal love? What do you think it is? What is it? Is it an event? Is it a thought that you hold on to? Is it something that you just don't want to deal with, so you put it over to one side hoping it'll disappear? You know, we go on this inner journey because we want to know who we are. and the inner journey leads us to some pretty dark spots sometimes. And it's accepting and loving those dark spots that are really, really important. So just spend a little time thinking about that and just thinking about being. Am I being my true self? Am I being myself and my fulfillment of all that there is? So until next week, well, I have Sunday, remember my Sunday thought. And if I manage to get to see a movie review that comes up on the channel, I want to thank you for your comments. I want to thank you for subscribing. I want to let you know that you can always contact me through the website, normacowie.com. 3 W's in front of that, of course. And just have a good week. Enjoy. Be at peace. Know that you're loved no matter what. If you don't love yourself, sorry. But if you do, the universe, Mother Earth, this planet loves you too. Thank you.